Roy Parker's bloodstained face twisted in anguish as he beheld the Malon Emperor Korvac execute Earth's leaders on the vidscreen, slicing their throats with his razor-sharp claws. No one expected humans to have access to the advanced technology that could save them now, but somewhere on this ruined Earth that technology was waiting. The reptilian aliens had caught humanity with its guard down. In 2150, 100 massive Malon warships, each 5 kilometers long and armed with planet-scorching plasma cannons, had invaded in force. Earth's missile defenses and energy shields were like cardboard against the ruthless efficiency of Emperor Korvac's fleet. Now major cities across the globe lay in ruins. New York, London, Tokyo, all rubble and corpses. Millions dead, countless more wounded or starving. The armies of mankind were decimated, outgunned and outnumbered by the superior alien force that occupied the planet. Parker gritted his teeth, watching Korvac's 7-foot armored form stalk away from the dead UN leaders, leaving blue blood pooling on the floor. The broadcast ended. Around him, the ragtag band of human resistance fighters huddled in the reinforced bunker, cleaning weapons and binding wounds. They had fought bravely these last months, waging a guerrilla war from the shadows. But it wasn't enough. They needed a miracle. As if in answer, Parker's radio crackled. "Roy, it's Jenna. I found something in the archives, some records of a secret research project from before the war. The file refers to some kind of alien-derived technology, a doomsday weapon. The notes are sparse, but it seems we were developing it in case of a scenario just like this. They never got to finish it, but maybe there's enough to turn the tide against the Malon." "Send me the coordinates," Parker said, hope stirring beneath his scarred features for the first time in months. If this lead was true, if some mad genius had left behind the key to humanity's salvation, then maybe, just maybe, mankind had a fighting chance to take back their world from these alien conquerors. He turned to address the assembled humans, these brave survivors who had seen their civilization crumble, their loved ones perish, and still found the strength to fight another day. "Gear up and get ready to move out. We've got a lead on some tech that could finally give us the edge over these scaly alien bastards. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The bunker filled with murmurs and a surge of energy. Weapons were checked, armor tightened. Humanity was bloodied and beaten, but unbroken. In all their long history, they had never faced a threat like the Malon. But then, no invading force had ever faced a species as indomitable as humankind when pushed to the brink. These Dune lizards were about to learn that the hard way. Parker nodded to his team as they breached the hidden entrance to Project Prometheus. Hawkeye Sullivan, the sharpshooter, took point, scanning for Malon sentries. Michael Mac Reeves, their tech guru, hacked the security systems, disabling alarms and cameras. Diego Boomer Ramirez, the demolitions expert, rigged charges to cover their escape. Deeper in the facility, they entered a cavernous hangar. Parker's jaw dropped. Sleek, midnight black ships filled the space, unlike anything he'd seen. "Mac, what the hell are those?" "I'm not sure," Mac replied, eyes wide. "But these readouts, gravity drives, phase-shifting capability, antimatter weapons. Roy, these beauties could turn a Malon cruiser into space dust." "Phantoms," a voice crackled over the PA. An older man's face appeared on a screen, Dr. Eric Donovan. "Our last best hope if the unthinkable occurred, and it has." "Doc, you beautiful bastard," Roy grinned. "Team, pick a ship and buckle up. We're taking these babies for a spin." Alarms blared as they powered up the Phantoms. Malon forces had tracked them. Plasma blasts rocked the hangar. "Punch it!" Parker yelled, engaging his ship's phase drive. The craft shimmered and shot through the hangar doors, the team close behind. Malon fighters swarmed them, plasma lancing past. But the Phantoms danced and weaved, untouchable. Hawkeye whooped over the comms, putting an antimatter bolt through an enemy's engines. The Malon ship vaporized instantly. "Holy Decade, did you see that?" Boomer laughed, blasting 2 more bogies. The Phantoms carved a path through the Malon squadron with merciless efficiency. Parker locked onto the final fighter, fingers tightening. Parker slammed the throttle forward, locking onto the final Malon fighter. His Phantom shuddered as its phase drive engaged, the craft vanishing from view and reappearing behind the enemy ship. A burst of antimatter fire from the Phantom's cannons turned the Malon vessel into an expanding cloud of superheated gas and debris. "Woo, did you see that shit?" Boomer's voice crackled over the comm, his Phantom decloaking off Parker's starboard wing. "These babies pack a punch." "Cut the chatter," Parker replied, checking his scopes. "Mac, input the coordinates Dr. Donovan sent. Let's get to that off-world base before more Malons show up." The Phantoms, sleek shadows against the starfield, banked in unison and accelerated away from Earth, their gravity drives warping space around them, streaks of starlight elongated into dazzling lines as the ships hurtled through the void at impossible speeds. Hours later, they decelerated near a nondescript moon in the outer reaches of the solar system. Its pockmarked surface, bathed in the faint light of the distant sun, betrayed no signs of the secret base hidden deep within. "Transmitting access codes now," Mac announced, fingers flying over his console. A hidden portal irised open on the moon's surface, revealing a cavernous hangar bathed in floodlights. The Phantoms glided through the atmospheric containment field and touched down on the deck, where a small crowd waited to greet them. Parker popped his canopy and clambered out, boots ringing on the hangar floor. His eyes widened as he recognized the man at the head of the reception party. "Dr. Donovan," he said, striding forward to clasp the scientist's hand. "Gotta say, I wasn't sure you made it off Earth." "Takes more than a Malon invasion to put me down," Donovan replied with a tight smile. He gestured to the hangar around them, filled with activity as techs swarmed over rows of Phantoms in various stages of assembly. "Welcome to Sanctuary. This is the heart of the Resistance now." Donovan led Parker and his team deeper into the base, past humming generators and bustling machine shops. "We've been stockpiling resources here for months," the scientist explained. "Ever since the Malon first appeared on our scopes. I always knew they might come in force someday." He paused before a massive blast door, keying in an access code. The door groaned open, revealing an enormous manufacturing floor filled with robotic assembly arms and conveyor belts. Partially completed, Phantoms gleamed under the harsh industrial lighting. "A hidden factory," Mac breathed, eyes wide. "You've been building more of these ships." Donovan nodded. "We can churn out hundreds of Phantoms here, given time and materials, and with the tech you've just field-tested, we can make them even deadlier." "Time for an upgrade," Hawkeye said with a grin, hefting his rifle. In a training hangar adjacent to the factory floor, Parker and his team spent the next days pushing themselves and their Phantoms to the limit. They dueled training drones in blistering dogfights, mastering the ship's phase-shifting abilities and devastating antimatter weapons. 50 battle-hardened veterans, hand-picked by Donovan, joined them in the exercises, forming the core of a new Phantom squadron. But their respite was short-lived. Proximity alarms blared through Sanctuary, the base's defensive systems snapping to high alert. Donovan's face, drained of color, appeared on a viewscreen. "It's the Malon," he said grimly. "A huge fleet just dropped out of FTL on the edge of the system. Their course projections show them heading straight for us." "How?" Mac demanded, hands clenched. "How could they have found this place?" "Doesn't matter now," Parker growled, already running for his Phantom. "We knew they'd come for us eventually. Time to show these alien bastards what humanity is made of." In Sanctuary's command center, Donovan pulled up a visual of the approaching enemy armada. Hundreds of Malon warships, their hulls bristling with weapons, advanced in formation against the starfield. Fighters and bombers swarmed around the larger vessels like angry insects. "So that's got to be every ship they have in system," Boomer muttered, face pale. Parker gripped the edge of the holo-display, jaw set. At the heart of the Malon fleet, a monstrous dreadnought dwarfed the vessels around it. Even at this distance, he could make out the spined contours of its hull, armored in layers of alien alloy. Batteries of planet-scorching plasma cannons studded its flanks, primed and ready for genocide. Donovan nodded to the tactical readout, where a single figure stood on the dreadnought's command deck. Easily 8 feet tall, the alien's massive frame was a grotesque fusion of reptilian scales and cybernetic enhancements. Implants studded his skull, pulsing with malevolent energy. "Zaxa," the scientist said quietly. "Korvac's chief enforcer, a war criminal responsible for butchering millions. He leads this assault." Parker met Donovan's gaze, a cold fury kindling in his gut. "Then let's go kill the bastard!" Phantom engines howled to life across Sanctuary's hangars as Parker and the human defenders, 50 strong, launched to meet the oncoming Malon swarm. The moon's defensive batteries erupted in sheets of nuclear fire, tearing gaps in the enemy formation, but still the aliens came on. "Phantoms, engage cloak," Parker barked, throwing his ship into a gut-wrenching corkscrew. "Get in close and hit them hard." The human ships rippled and vanished from view, sensor ghosts against the void. Malon fighters scrambled to lock on, disruptor pulses stitching space as they fired blind. But the Phantoms wove between the enemy salvos with preternatural agility, alien gunners swiveling frantically in their turrets, unable to draw a bead. Hawkeye whooped in savage joy as his guns spat antimatter fire, breaching a Malon frigate's shields and turning its hull to molten slag. "Stay evasive," Parker warned as the Phantoms danced and blasted through the enemy screen. "Don't let them pin you down." All across the battle space, human ships flickered in and out of cloak, harrying the Malon fleet like wolves snapping at a bear. Plasma torpedoes and graviton pulses crisscrossed the void as both sides fought with desperate ferocity, massed batteries of alien weapons, seeking to swat the elusive Phantoms from space. Mac cursed as a near miss hammered his shields, the cockpit lights flickering red. "They're trying to bracket us," he shouted over the din of combat. "Force us into a crossfire." "Shift phase and break contact," Boomer called, his Phantom blurring into intangibility as a salvo of plasma rounds sliced through the space he'd just vacated. "We're no good to anyone dead." The human ships wrenched into evasive spirals, antimatter blasts flashing against the void as they fought to disengage. But the Malon pressed the attack with single-minded fury, heedless of the losses Parker's pilots inflicted. For every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more surged forward, weapons blazing as if driven by their commander's sheer ruthless will. On the Dreadnought's bridge, Zaxa snarled in rage as another of his ships bloomed into flame, holed by a Phantom's gunfire. His artificial eye whirred and focused, overlaying tactical schematics on the carnage outside. The human craft were fast and well-armed, striking with a precision that belied their crude, primitive construction. But they were only delaying the inevitable. Zaxa had the numbers and the firepower to scour the vermin from his skies, and when he was done, he would personally drag what was left of their pathetic little base apart, deck by deck, until he found whatever hole their cowardly leader was cowering in. He would burn the human resistance to ash and mount the charid bonus of their heroes on the prow of his ship. Zaxel raised a clawed fist, the servos in his armor whining with barely restrained power. "All ships, close formation and advance. Overwhelm them with your guns. Let none survive." The Malon fleet tightened into an armored wedge, the Dreadnought at its heart, and bore down on the beleaguered Phantoms with ruthless purpose. Disruptor fire and plasma blasts filled the void, chewing into shields and armor, reaving metal and flesh in sprays of freezing gas. Parker gritted his teeth as a Malon particle beam clipped his wing, alarms shrieking in the cockpit. Warning sigils flashed angry red across his displays, shield strength dropping into the red. "We can't hold them like this," he shouted over the comm. "They're too many. We need to pull back, draw them into Sanctuary's kill zone." "There's too many," Hawkeye yelled, juking his Phantom to evade the hail of fire. "We'll never make it." "Damn it, Sullivan, that's an order," Parker barked. "All Phantoms, head for the hangar. We'll catch them in the crossfire from the base defenses." The humans broke off, racing back towards the moon with the Malon Wolfpack in hot pursuit. Plasma torpedoes and graviton blasts shot past the fleeing Phantoms, the enemy fleet clawing for the kill. Parker slammed his fist on the comm panel, patching through to the base. "Donovan, we're coming in hot with the Malon right on our ass. Get those gun batteries ready." "Acknowledged," the scientist replied, his voice ragged with tension. "Defense grid powering up now. Bring them to us, Roy." The Phantom screamed over the lunar surface, weaving between geysers of debris as the Malon pounded the ground behind them. Ahead, camouflaged hatches yawned open in the moon's craggy hide, missile racks and beam cannons rising from concealed silos to track the oncoming swarm. "Phantoms, break now," Parker roared. The human ships peeled away in perfect synchronicity, antimatter blasts hammering the Malon vanguard as they overshot the base. And then Sanctuary opened fire with every gun it had, the moon's surface erupting in a storm of nuclear hellfire. Missiles, lasers, and plasma bolts converged on the enemy fleet in a blistering crossfire, tearing massive gaps in their formations. Malon ships spun and shattered under the onslaught, hulls splintering into clouds of molten fragments. Zaxor bellowed in rage as his ships died by the dozens, caught between the humans' accursed base and their phantom fighters. The dreadnought's shields flared and crackled under the hammer of hostile fire, energy levels plummeting into the red. "All power to forward batteries," the general screamed, cybernetic fists clenched. "Punch through their defenses. Destroy that base." The dreadnought's siege cannons spoke as one, unleashing a torrent of planet-cracking plasma fire. The beams slammed into Sanctuary's shields like the fist of an angry god, the barrier flaring incandescent as it strained to absorb the titanic energies. The base's foundations shook, cracks racing through armored bulkheads as the Malon pressed their assault. "Shields at 30% and falling," Mac reported, his face ashen. "We can't take another hit like that." "Divert all power to the defense grid," Donovan shouted over the din of combat. "Hold them back." Parker pulled his Phantom into a tight corkscrew, antimatter cannons blazing as he and Sullivan dueled Zaxor's elite squadron. The cyborg general's strike craft danced through the firestorm, its advanced shields shrugging off hits that would have vaporized lesser ships. Zaxor's return fire hammered the Phantoms, green plasma bolts searing past. Sullivan juked hard, trying to evade, but a torpedo clipped his wing. Fire erupted from ruptured conduits. Alarms shrieked. "I'm hit bad," Sullivan yelled over the comm, his voice ragged. "Reactors in the red, gotta punch out." "Eject," Parker barked. "I'll come get you." Sullivan's canopy blew and his command chair rocketed into space, moments before his Phantom exploded. Parker wrenched his ship around, diving towards his wingman's beacon. But Zaxor's fighters pounced, cannons raking Parker's shields. Snarling, Parker triggered his phase drive. The Phantom shimmered and vanished, slipping past the enemy fire. He materialized beside Sullivan's drifting chair, engaging the tractor beam. The invisible ship snatched Sullivan from the jaws of death. "Gotcha!" Parker called as Sullivan tumbled into his cockpit. "Hang on!" Zaxor's fighters whirled, trying to reacquire the target. But Parker was already gone, the Phantom screaming towards the dreadnought at the heart of the enemy fleet. "Roy, what the hell are you doing?" Sullivan demanded, strapping into the co-pilot's seat. "Ending this," Parker growled. He punched the comm. "Mac, Boomer, form up on me. We're taking that dreadnought out." "With you, boss," Boomer whooped. The Phantoms sliced through the battle, weaving and dodging, pummeling Malon ships with lancing antimatter beams. The dreadnought loomed ahead, a massive wedge bristling with gun batteries. Fighters and plasma fire swarmed around it in a lethal shell. Parker gritted his teeth, hands flying over the controls. The Phantoms went evasive, juking and rolling, as the dreadnought's cannons erupted in sheets of deadly green fire. Proximity alarms howled. Near misses hammered the ships, shields flaring. The Phantoms danced through the onslaught, phase drives flickering as they raced for the weak point in the dreadnought's armor, its reactor exhaust ports. "Arm torpedoes," Parker called, the dreadnought filling his scopes. "Ripple fire now!" The Phantoms shuddered as they unleashed a blistering volley of antimatter warheads. The torpedoes punched through the ports and detonated deep within the dreadnought's hull. Explosions ripped through the ship, splitting its armored spine, tearing it apart from within. The stricken behemoth reeled, belching fire, as secondary detonations consumed its innards. The dreadnought cracked like an egg and exploded in a blinding fireball. The shockwave sent Malon ships tumbling, their formation shattering. "Hell yeah," Boomer crowed. "Scratch one dreadnought." But Parker had no time to celebrate. His scopes pinged with new contacts, another wave of Malon reinforcements pouring from the shimmering wormhole at the edge of the battlespace. "Phantoms, regroup at Sanctuary," he called. "We're not done yet." Zaxa's voice crackled over the comm, cold and mocking. "Savor your small victory, humans. You've sealed your own doom. My Lord Korvac now knows the location of your pathetic base. Soon, the full might of the Malon Empire will crash down upon you. This isn't over." As the Phantoms raced back to Sanctuary, Parker felt a chill settle in his gut. Zaxor was right. They'd stirred the hornet's nest, and the swarm was coming. But then he thought of the brave men and women fighting beside him, the countless innocents under the Malon yoke, the young recruits' words, "We're the only ones who can stop them." He tightened his grip on the stick, jaw clenched. So be it. If this was humanity's last stand, they would make it one for the ages. Parker would lead them for the lives already lost, and those yet to be saved. He opened a comm channel to Sanctuary. "Donovan, it's Parker. The Malon know our location. Expect imminent assault. Prepare for siege and ready every phantom we've got. One way or another, this ends now." Parker's stomach churned as Donovan's grim face filled the view screen. "Zaxor knows our location. The Malon Armada is already en route. I'm initiating Exodus Protocol. All personnel, evacuate to fallback positions immediately." Alarms blared through Sanctuary's halls, the base shaking as Malon Vanguard ships bombarded its shields from orbit. Techs and soldiers sprinted to transports, voices raised in barely controlled panic. "Roy, I have a critical mission for you," Donovan said, his voice cutting through the chaos. He punched up a schematic, a bulbous Malon structure nestled in the rusted canyons of Mars. "This is a primary Malon supply depot. Intel suggests they have a prototype weapon stored there, something codenamed Graviton Disruptor. From what we've pieced together, it can generate localized singularities." "Miniature black holes," Mac breathed. "Jesus." Donovan nodded grimly. "That tech could be the key to beating the Malon. Roy, I need you to lead a strike team to infiltrate that depot and secure the disruptor. It may be our last chance." "Consider it done," Parker growled. He turned to his team. "Hawkeye, Mac, Boomer, gear up, we're going shopping." 20 minutes later, 20 Phantom ships rocketed away from Sanctuary's hangar, Parker in the lead. The base receded behind them, its surface pockmarked with plasma blasts as the Malon fleet swelled in their scopes. "Christ, look at the carcan size of that fleet!" Boomer swore over the comm. 1,000 alien ships hung against the starfield, a swarm of hungry locusts ready to strip Earth and its defenders bare. "Cut the chatter and form up," Parker ordered, jaw tight. "We've got a job to do." The Phantoms plunged into Mars' thin atmosphere, the red planet's swirling dust storms masking their approach. Muted light filtered through the cockpit as they leveled out over a jagged canyon, Malon structures jutting from the rock walls like angular steel tumors. "TAC scan shows multiple hostile emplacements ringing the depot," Mac reported, hands flying over his console. "Plasma cannons, disruptor batteries, grav mine launchers. They aren't taking any chances with security." "Then neither will we," Parker replied coldly. "Phantoms, decloak and engage. Give 'em hell." The human ships rippled into visibility, lancing blue beams splitting the ruddy light as they strafed the Malon defenses. Gouts of vaporized rock and metal erupted from the canyon walls as the emplacements blew apart under the onslaught, Malon soldiers scattering like ants from a kicked mound. "Touchdown in 5, Sullivan called out, spotting a landing pad jutting from the depot's main structure. Hatches blew open as the Phantoms touched down, disgorging Parker and his team into the fray. They charged across the platform, mag boots clanging, weapons spitting blue death. Malon troopers boiled out to meet them, disruptor rifles flashing crimson, the air humming with murderous energy. Parker dove into cover behind a bulkhead, plasma hissing past his helmet. He blind-fired around the edge, a Malon's skull popping wetly as the shot found its mark. "Flank right," he barked into the comm, priming a plasma grenade and hurling it at a cluster of hostiles. The explosive went off like a blue-white sun, alien screams swallowed by the roar. Sullivan and Mac pressed forward, energy swords flashing as they carved a path through the enemy ranks. Boomer followed close behind, his exosuit servos whining as he hefted a massive plasma cannon, hosing the Malon with blistering volleys. "Cutting through their network now," Mac yelled, Omni-tool glowing as he sliced into a bulkhead control panel. The heavy doors to the depot's interior rumbled open. "We're in!" The humans plunged into the structure's guts, mag boots ringing on metal catwalks. Strobing alarm lights painted the dim corridors a hellish red, steam hissing from ruptured conduits. Malon defenders met them at every junction, disruptor bolts filling the air with ionized fury. Parker and his team pushed deeper into the maze, trading shots with the aliens, leaving shattered bodies and blasted bulkheads in their wake. A towering blast door loomed ahead, heavily reinforced, blocking access to the depot's central chamber. "Demo charges," Parker shouted, slapping breaching explosives onto the alloy surface. The team stacked up, weapons leveled. "Breach in 3, 2, 1... The charges blew, shearing the door apart in a gout of fire and debris. The humans stormed into the chamber, sweeping their rifles, and froze in their tracks. A hulking figure rose from the shadows, servos whining, metal glinting beneath scaled flesh. Its massive fists clenched, biceps thicker than tree trunks, glowing red eyes, set in a flat, vicious skull fixed on the strike team with malevolent hunger. "What the hell is that thing?" Sullivan hissed, rifle muzzle trembling. More shapes emerged from the gloom behind the brute, each as huge and heavily muscled. Genetically engineered Malon super soldiers, monstrous and lethal. "Sarty," Parker spat. "Light 'em up." The chamber exploded with weapons fire, tracers and energy beams ripping back and forth as the humans and Malon clashed. A super soldier charged, closing the distance with terrifying speed, smashing two troopers aside like ragdolls. It loomed over Parker, a snarl rippling its nightmare face. Parker rolled aside as a fist like a wrecking ball pulverized the deck where he'd stood a heartbeat before. He came up firing, plasma bolt stitching the monster's flesh, black ichor spraying. It roared in fury and backhanded him across the room, his armor's integrity alarms shrieking. Sullivan screamed in rage and agony as a super soldier grabbed him, beefy fingers sinking into his exosuit like claws into soft clay. Bones snapped, blood spraying as the monster squeezed. Mac dove in, energy sword flashing, slicing through the brute's arm in a spray of gore. The beast reeled back, howling. "Fall back!" Parker roared, dragging himself to his feet. "Boomer, lay down suppressing fire!" The team scrambled back, plasma and disruptor bolts crisscrossing the chamber in a lethal web. Boomer stood his ground, cannon roaring as he poured fire into the oncoming monsters. "Puma, move your ass!" Sullivan screamed, slumped against Mac, limp and bleeding. "Just go!" Boomer bellowed back, servos whining as he wrestled with a super soldier hand to hand. "Get that geese out, disruptor! I'll hold these bastards!" With a cry of fury and desperation, Boomer tackled the super soldier, bear-hugging it with all his exosuit's strength. Arcs of electricity crackled over the embrace as Boomer overloaded his suit's power core. Man and monster vanished in a searing flash of light, the blast wave hurling Parker and the others back. Ears ringing, Parker staggered to the center of the chamber, to the reinforced vault housing the graviton disruptor. Mac hobbled to the control panel, blood sheeting his face, and stabbed in the access code with a shaking hand. The vault hissed open. Parker reached in and pulled out a heavy angular device, a miniature cyclotron ringed with confinement coils and graviton projectors. The disruptor. "Let's move," he snarled, hefting the weapon. Plasma bolts sizzled around them as more Malon poured into the chamber. The team fell back, fighting for every inch, leaving a trail of bodies and blood in their wake. They burst from the depot's shattered gates, a sea of Malon troopers on their heels. Engines screaming, the Phantom swooped in low for extraction. Parker and Mac hauled Sullivan's broken body aboard as enemy fire hammered the ship's shields. "Go, go, go!" Parker roared, and the Phantoms clawed for open sky. Geese pressed the team into their crash couches as the ships rocketed away from the planet's surface. Behind them, the supply depot disappeared in a rippling series of explosions as Mac's parting gift of antimatter charges ignited its reactor. "Holy Aje," Hawkeye breathed, staring out the viewport. 1,000 Malon ships swept past in formation, disruptor cannons swiveling to target the planet below. Emerald beams lanced out, ripping through Martian bedrock, gouging continent-sized scars into the surface. Cities and settlements vaporized instantly, millions of lives snuffed out in a heartbeat. Parker's jaw clenched, knuckles white around the disruptor's housing. Boomer was gone, Sullivan a broken shell beside him, a stab of grief and rage twisted in his gut. But beneath it, a cold, ruthless determination crystallized. The Malon had sown the wind. Now with the disruptor in human hands they would reap the whirlwind. This ended now, even if Parker had to crack the galaxy in half to see it done. Parker's Phantom knifed through the asteroid field, the ship's hull pinging as tiny rocks pinged off the armor. The desolate expanse of tumbling stone stretched out before him, a bleak reminder of how far humanity had fallen. Sanctuary was gone, reduced to molten slag by the Malon onslaught. Billions dead, the remnants of mankind scattered to the stars. But a spark of hope still burned in Parker's chest, the graviton disruptor heavy in his hands. He followed the coordinates Donovan had transmitted, weaving through the shifting maze of rock. A jagged chunk of nickel iron loomed ahead, easily 5 clicks long. Parker pulled up hard, the Phantom's gravity drive thrumming as it hugged the asteroid's surface. There, a hidden docking bay cut into the rock face. Parker angled the ship towards it, landing thrusters flaring. The Phantom settled onto the deck with a clang, hydraulics hissing. The airlock cycled open. Parker stepped out, mag boots clanging, Sullivan and Mac close behind. Donovan strode forward to meet them, his face lined with exhaustion and grief. "Boomer?" the scientist asked quietly. Parker shook his head. Donovan closed his eyes for a long moment, then straightened. "Come, we have much to discuss." In the outpost's cramped briefing room, Donovan pulled up a holo of Kronos, the massive gas giant dominating the display. The graviton disruptor is incomplete. To unleash its full potential, it requires a rare isotope, Neptunium-237, and our scans show a rich vein of it here. He stabbed a finger at Kronos' swirling core. Sullivan let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of a trip, Doc. Kronos' atmosphere is a makuntinesho maelstrom. Thousands of kilometers of crushing pressure and hypercanes that could tear a ship apart." "Which is why you'll be taking this." Donovan tapped a control, and a sleek Phantom materialized on the holo, bulkier, its hull reinforced with additional armor plating. A mining variant, designed to withstand the most hostile environments. It's equipped with an ionic drill that can bore through Kronos' diamond mantle. Parker ran a hand along the ship's contours, mind racing, a desperate plan, a suicide run. But what choice did they have? He met Donovan's gaze, jaw set. "When do we leave?" Hours later, the mining Phantom pierced Kronos' roiling cloud cover, the ship bucking and shuddering as it plunged into the maelstrom. Hurricane-force winds lashed the hull, lightning crackling through banks of churning vapor. Parker gripped the control yoke with white knuckles, fighting to hold the ship steady. "J-force is approaching 10 Gs, Mac shouted over the howling turbulence. "Compensators are barely keeping up." Parker gritted his teeth, sweat beading his brow as he wrestled with the bucking ship. The Phantom groaned around them, superstructure creaking under the immense pressure. Through the viewports, the hellish landscape of Kronos' atmosphere stretched out before them, a roiling sea of noxious gas punctuated by jagged peaks of frozen ammonia. Down they plunged, the ship's armor glowing cherry red as it pushed through the ever-thickening soup of the gas giant's lower reaches. Gravity clawed at them, a physical force slamming them into their acceleration couches. "Approaching the core," Sullivan called out, his voice strained. "Neptunium readings are off the charts." Parker angled the ship towards a massive overhang of metallic hydrogen, the ionic drill thrumming to life. The Phantom shuddered as the drill bit into the diamond-hard mantle, the ship's frame groaning under the strain. Proximity alarms blared. "Incoming contact," Mac yelled. "It's Malon." A sleek alien craft, all spikes and sharp angles, burst from the clouds above them. Disruptor pulses flashed from its wingtips, slamming into the Phantom's shields. Parker wrenched the ship into a stomach-churning spiral, ionic drill disengaging as they pulled away from the core. The Malon fighter matched the maneuver, cannons blazing. "It's a stealth ship," Sullivan shouted, hands flying over the weapons console. "Must have followed us in." The two craft danced and wove through the hellish atmosphere, plasma beams crisscrossing the roiling clouds. The Phantom juked and spun, its reinforced armor barely withstanding the punishing gravitational forces. Mac's hands blurred over his controls, the ship's computer core straining as he pushed it to its limits. "I think I can get a lock," he called out. "Parker, bring us about." Parker hauled the control yoke hard to port. The Phantom slewed around. Mining drill extended like a jousting lance. Mac stabbed a control, and the drill shot forward on a carbon nanotube tether, slamming into the Malon ship's flank. The alien craft lurched, hull plating crumpling under the impact. "Tether's magnetic grapple is locked on," Mac crowed. "I'm reeling them in." The Phantom's engines roared as it strained against the tether, dragging the Malone ship closer. Disruptor fire pounded the mining ship's shields, alarms shrieking. "Shields are failing," Sullivan warned. "We can't take much more of this." "We don't need to." Parker's voice was cold as space itself. "Mac, blow the airlock. We're boarding them." Decompression alarms howled as the mining ship's airlock blasted open, the escaping atmosphere forming a temporary bridge between the two ships. Parker and Sullivan leaped across the gap, mag boots clanging onto the Malon hull. Parker's plasma rifle was in his hands, energy blade shimmering along the barrel as he carved into the enemy ship's hull. The metal parted like butter, atmosphere howling through the breach. The two humans plunged into the Malon ship, weapon muzzles flaring as they engaged the aliens hand-to-hand. Disruptor bolts flashed past Parker's helmet, near misses searing his armor. He fell back, letting the panicked Malon charge past him, then cut them down from behind with bursts of white-hot plasma. Sullivan was a blur of motion, his power sword crackling as it clove through chitinous armor and scaled flesh. Malon warriors screeched and died, ichor spraying the bulkheads. The bridge blast door loomed ahead. Parker primed a breaching charge and slapped it onto the alloy surface. The explosion ripped the door from its tracks, smoke billowing. Parker and Sullivan stormed through the breach, rifles leveled. The Malon bridge crew scrambled for their weapons, too slow. Plasma bolts stitched across the control stations, exploding consoles and rupturing pressure suits. In moments it was over. The final Malon crewman slumped over his sparking console, oozing green blood. Parker shoved the corpse aside and accessed the ship's systems. "Engines and weapons are ours," he reported over the comm. "Mac, get your ass over here. We've got a planet core to drill." With Mac at the captured ship's helm, the humans descended once more into Kronos' roiling depths. The Malon ship's advanced cloaking systems masked their presence, sensor ghosts against the maelstrom. At the core's edge, the ionic drill whirred to life, boring into the diamond mantle. Agonizing minutes passed, the ship shuddering around them. Then a hiss of triumph from Mac. "I have it!" He held up a glowing cylinder, wisps of vapor curling from its surface. "Neptunium-237, as much as we can carry." "Then let's get the hell out of here." Parker plugged the cylinder into a reinforced extractor case. "Donovan is waiting." The Malon ship clawed for open space, straining against Kronos' immense gravity. As they broke free of the gas giant's atmosphere, proximity alarms blared once more. So a dozen Malon fighters, their hulls an oily black against the stars, fell into formation around the captured ship. A comm crackled to life, a familiar voice rasping through the static. "Well done, primates," Zax's cybernetic visage leered at them from the viewscreen. "You've led me right to your little hidey hole." The screen flicked to an image of the human outpost, a swarm of Malon warships closing on it from all directions. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Zaxor bared sharpened teeth in a grin, his artificial eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "I let you steal that Neptunium, let you think you'd won. And now, I will bury you. Bury you like the insects you are." The comm cut off. On the screen, the first Malon warships opened fire on the outpost, plasma beams searing its armored flanks. Parker's heart clenched, his mind racing. They were too far away, could never reach them in time. Once again, he'd played right into the enemy's hands. Once again, people would die because of him. Donovan, the Resistance, humanity's last hope. All would be ash and echoes. Unless Parker's gaze fell on the graviton disruptor, now primed and ready with its Neptunium core, a weapon to crack planets or to shatter fleets. He turned to Mac and Sullivan, his expression grim. "Get this ship ready for a jump, we're going in." The command center wall exploded inward in a spray of shrapnel and sparks. Parker and his team whirled, weapons snapping up, as Zaxa's towering mech suit crashed through the breach. "Open fire!" Parker roared. Plasma bolts and EMP grenades slammed into the mech's armored hide. The shot splashed harmlessly off its energy shields. Zaxa's cruel laughter echoed from the suit's external speakers. "Is that the best you can do?" the Malon commander sneered. His mech's arm cannon swiveled, locking onto the humans. "Let me show you how it's done." The cannon spat streams of superheated plasma. Mac dove aside, rolling behind a shattered console as the bolts stitched the deck. Sullivan charged, plasma sword flashing, the glowing blade carved into the mech's knee joint, sparks cascading. Zaxo snarled and backhanded the human away. Sullivan slammed into the bulkhead and slumped, unconscious. Parker activated his exoskeleton strength enhancers and leapt, firing his gauntlet grapples. The metal lines snagged on the mech's chestplate. Parker reeled himself in, slamming a power fist into Zaxa's faceplate. The alien inside roared in fury. A metal claw seized Parker, squeezing. Armor plates crumpled, bones cracked. Parker screamed. Across the command center, a plasma bolt clipped Mac's helmet, sending him sprawling. A falling beam caught Dr. Donovan, pinning him to the deck. Parker and Zaxa grappled, servos whining, ripping into each other with savage abandon. Warnings flashed across Parker's HUD. Armor integrity critical, weapons offline. He was losing. A final desperate idea crystallized in his pain-soaked brain. He keyed the exoskeleton's self-destruct and set the timer. If he was going down, he'd take this bastard with him. "You're finished, ape," Zaxor gloated, mech fist clenching around Parker's chest. Bones snapped, blood flecked Parker's lips. "You've lost." "Not yet," Parker gasped. With a final surge of strength, he plunged his hands into the mech's chest wound, fingers locking around its power core. The exoskeleton's microfusion cell whined as it overloaded. "Burn in hell." Behind them, Dr. Donovan shoved the beam aside, teeth clenched in pain. He staggered to the graviton disruptor, hands flying over its controls. "Parker, get clear," he shouted. Zaxor's head snapped around. He snarled, raising his cannon to fire. Too slow. Dr. Donovan activated the disruptor. A blinding pulse of gravitic force erupted from the weapon's barrel, slamming into Zaxor's mech suit. The machine buckled, imploding, as a miniature black hole formed at its heart. Zaxor's scream distorted, stretching, as he vanished into the singularity's maw. The black hole pulsed, sucking in debris, growing. Parker disengaged from the crumpling mech and launched himself away, thrusters firing. The singularity ripped Zaxor's suit apart, then evaporated in a burst of hawking radiation. The blast wave slammed Parker into the far wall, his exoskeleton shattering. He fell, blood pooling around him. On the shattered command deck, Dr. Donovan lowered the disruptor, his face ashen. Beyond the outpost's walls, visible through the viewports, Malon ships reeled drunkenly, their shields flickering and dying as the disruptor's EMP shockwave washed over them. "All ships engage!" Admiral Stanton's voice crackled over the comm. The remnants of the human fleet, phantoms and battered cruisers, surged from the asteroid field, weapons blazing. Antimatter missiles and plasma beams tore into the unshielded Malon vessels. Hulls shattered, reactors ruptured. The aliens scattered, fleeing as their fleet died in fire and ruin. In the command center, Dr. Donovan stumbled to Parker's side, med-scanner already out. Sullivan and Mac, battered but alive, joined him. They knelt beside their fallen leader as Donovan ran the scanner over Parker's broken body. "Is he?" Mac asked hoarsely. "He's alive," Donovan said. "Barely. We need to get him to the med bay now." Sullivan nodded, jaw tight. He and Mac lifted Parker gently, carrying him through the shattered command center. Dr. Donovan followed, the graviton disruptor clutched tight. Around them, the outpost shuddered as the last of the Malon ships fell to the human counterattack. They had won. The cost had been high in blood and pain and friends lost, but humanity had stood fast against the alien onslaught. They had shown the galaxy what free people could do when pushed to the brink. And they would show them again, Parker knew, as consciousness faded. This was only the beginning. Mankind would take the fight to the Malon, to their very heart. They would end this threat, once and for all. No matter the cost. In the medical bay of the asteroid outpost, Parker sat beside Sullivan's bed, his face a mask of exhaustion and worry. Dr. Donovan worked furiously to stabilize the wounded soldier, his hands a blur as he sealed lacerations and mended broken bones with advanced medical tools. Mac burst into the room, his face ashen. "Roy, you need to see this." He activated a view screen, the image resolving to show the leering face of Emperor Korvac. "Congratulations on your hollow victory, primates," the Malon sneered. "But your pathetic resistance ends now. As we speak, a virus engineered to target your inferior DNA is spreading across your homeworld. Billions will die choking on their own blood, and there is nothing you can do to stop it." Parker's fists clenched, rage and despair warring within him. Korvac continued, his voice dripping with sadistic glee. "But I am not without mercy. I will offer you a choice, Parker. Surrender yourself to me, and I will provide the antidote. Refuse, and watch your species wither and die." The transmission cut out. Parker slammed his fist against the wall, the metal denting under the force of his anger. "That son of a bitch, he's gone too far this time." Dr. Donovan looked up from Sullivan's prone form, his expression grave. "Roy, if what Korvac says is true, we don't have much time. The virus will spread exponentially. We need that antidote." Parker nodded, his jaw set. "Then we go get it. Mac, prep the Malon stealth ship we captured. We're taking the fight to Korvac." Hours later, the angular silhouette of the Malon vessel sliced through the void, its cloaking field shimmering. Inside the cramped cockpit, Parker, Sullivan, Mac, and Dr. Donovan pored over a holographic schematic of the Citadel, Korvac's fortified space station. "The station is protected by a multi-layered energy shield," Mac explained, pointing to a pulsing red barrier. "And it's crawling with Korvac's elite guard. Frontal assault is suicide." "Then we don't go in the front," Parker replied, his eyes narrowed. "Sullivan and I will infiltrate using cloaking suits. Mac, you and the doc stay on the ship and hack their systems. Disable that shield and create a diversion." Sullivan, his wounds bandaged but his eyes clear, nodded grimly. "Just like old times, eh, Roy?" As the stealth ship drifted closer to the massive citadel, Parker and Sullivan donned their cloaking suits, the advanced material shimmering and blending with the background. They crept through the station's cavernous hangar, dodging patrols of heavily armed Malon soldiers. Parker's heart hammered in his chest as they moved deeper into the citadel, the air thick with tension. A squad of guards marched past, their boots clanging on the metal deck. Parker held his breath, his cloaking suit barely compensating for the movement. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the station. The deck shuddered as a series of explosions rocked the Citadel's outer hull. Mac's voice crackled over the comm. "The shield is down, but I can only give you a few minutes. Move fast." Parker and Sullivan burst into motion, sprinting down the corridors as Malon soldiers shouted in confusion. They reached a heavily reinforced blast door, the entrance to Korvac's inner sanctum. "Breaching charge!" Parker yelled, slapping a disc of high-yield explosives onto the door's control panel. The charge detonated with a thunderous roar, the door buckling inward. Parker and Sullivan stormed through the breach, plasma rifles spitting blue fire. Korvac's personal guard, towering reptilian warriors clad in glittering armor, met them with a wall of disruptor fire. Sullivan dove into cover, lobbing a plasma grenade into the Malon ranks. The explosion ripped through the chamber, sending armored bodies flying. Parker vaulted over a shattered console, his gravity boots allowing him to run along the ceiling as he rained fire on the guards below. A disruptor bolt clipped Sullivan's shoulder, spinning him around. He fell, his rifle clattering away. A Malon guard loomed over him, energy glaive raised for the killing blow. Parker leapt from the ceiling, tackling the guard and driving his combat knife into the alien's throat. Hot blood sprayed across his visor as he rolled to his feet, dragging Sullivan behind a pillar. "Hold on, Jack," Parker gritted out, applying pressure to his friend's wound. Sullivan's face was pale, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The remaining guards closed in, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Parker knew they were out of time, out of options. He had to get to Korvac, had to end this now. With a roar of fury and desperation, Parker charged the Malon line, plasma rifle blazing. He felt disruptor bolts sizzle past him, heard the screams of the dying. His world narrowed to the sights of his weapon, the pounding of his heart, the knowledge that billions of lives hung in the balance. And then he was through, the last guard falling with a smoking hole in his chest. Parker stood before the massive doors of Korvac's throne room, blood dripping from his armor, Sullivan's agonized breathing echoing in his ears. He kicked the doors open, the metal slamming against the walls with a resounding boom. And there, seated upon a throne of twisted metal and bone, was Emperor Korvac himself, his eyes glinting with malice and triumph. Parker raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "It's over, Korvac. Give me the antidote and I might let you live." The Malon Emperor laughed, the sound cold and cruel. He stood, his massive frame unfolding, a dark metal gauntlet encasing his right arm. "You are too late, human. The virus has already begun its work. Soon your pathetic species will be nothing more than a memory." Parker's heart clenched, rage and despair threatening to overwhelm him. But he pushed it down, forced himself to focus on the mission, on the billions counting on him. He charged forward, plasma rifle forgotten, a primal scream tearing from his throat. Korvac met him head-on, the Emperor's gauntlet crackling with dark energy. They clashed in the center of the throne room, the air shimmering with the force of their blows. Parker ducked and weaved, his combat knife flashing, seeking gaps in Korvac's armor. The Emperor was fast, far faster than any Malon Parker had faced before, his gauntlet leaving trails of searing heat as it slashed through the air. Parker leaped back, chest heaving, blood running from a dozen wounds. Korvac advanced, his eyes blazing with sadistic glee. "Did you truly think you could defeat me, primate?" the Emperor snarled. "I have conquered 1,000 worlds, crushed 1,000,000 foes beneath my heel. What hope do you have?" Parker spat blood, his grip tightening on his knife. "I have something you'll never understand, Korvac. Something worth fighting for." He lunged forward, feinting left, then driving his knife towards Korvac's throat. The Emperor's gauntlet snapped up, seizing Parker's wrist in an unbreakable grip. Bones ground together, the knife falling from nerveless fingers. Korvac laughed, his other hand clamping around Parker's throat, lifting him off his feet. "And what is that, human? What is this thing you believe gives you power?" Parker choked, black spots swimming in his vision. He could feel his strength fading, his life slipping away. But in that moment, he saw the faces of all those he fought for. Sullivan, Mac, Dr. Donovan, the brave men and women of the resistance, the innocent civilians huddled in fear. and he knew that he would not fail them. With the last of his strength, Parker drove his thumb into Korvac's eye, the soft orb rupturing under the force of the blow. The Emperor howled in agony, his grip loosening. Parker dropped to the floor, gasping for breath, and reached for his fallen plasma rifle. He leveled the weapon at Korvac's head, the Emperor clutching at his ruined eye, ichor streaming down his face. "It's hope, you bastard," Parker snarled. "Hope for a better tomorrow, a tomorrow without you in it." And he pulled the trigger, the plasma bolt punching through Korvac's skull in a spray of blood and bone. The Emperor toppled backwards, his body sprawling across the throne room floor. Parker staggered to the throne, his vision blurring, his wounds screaming with every step. He reached into Korvac's robes, his fingers closing around a small vial filled with a glowing blue liquid, the antidote. He keyed his comm, his voice a ragged whisper. "MacDoc, I have it. Prep the ship for extraction." As Parker limped back towards Sullivan's still form, the Citadel shuddering around him as Mac's sabotage took hold, he allowed himself a small smile. They had done it. Against all odds, against the might of an alien empire, they had prevailed. Earth would live, humanity would survive, and the Malon would learn the true strength of the human spirit, the indomitable will of a species that refused to die. That was all that mattered. Parker stepped into Korvac's throne room, the massive doors slamming shut behind him with a resounding clang. The chamber was a cavernous expanse of polished metal and pulsing energy conduits, dominated by a towering throne of jagged obsidian, and there, rising from that throne, was Korvac himself, a colossus clad in ornate battle armor that seemed to drink in the light. "So the great Roy Parker," Korvac sneered, his voice a rumble of dark amusement. "The hero of humanity come to face me at last." Parker raised his plasma rifle, the weapon suddenly feeling inadequate against the sheer presence of the Malon Emperor. "It's over, Korvac. Your forces are defeated, your schemes unraveled. Surrender now, and maybe I'll let you live." Korvac threw back his head and laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber like the tolling of a funeral bell. "Surrender? To a pathetic primate like you?" He stepped forward, his armor whirring and clicking as it reconfigured itself, panels shifting to reveal an array of gleaming weapons. "I think not. If you want your precious antidote, human, you'll have to take it from my cold, dead hands." With a roar, Korvac charged, his armor-clad form blurring with speed. Parker barely had time to dodge as a massive fist slammed into the ground where he'd been standing, cracking the metal floor. He rolled to his feet, firing his rifle, but the plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against Korvac's energy shields. The Emperor closed in, his gauntlets crackling with dark energy. Parker ducked and weaved, his own battered armor sparking as he strained to avoid the crushing blows. Korvac was fast, far faster than any opponent Parker had faced before, and each near miss sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber. Parker activated his suit's strength enhancers, the servos whining as they strained to match Korvac's power. He landed a solid blow to the Emperor's chest plate, the impact sending Korvac staggering back a step. But the Malon recovered quickly, his armor already reconfiguring to compensate. "Is that the best you can do?" Korvac taunted, energy blades sliding from his gauntlets with a hiss. He slashed at Parker, the blades humming as they clove the air. Parker parried with his rifle, the weapon sparking and smoking as it absorbed the blows. They traded strikes, Parker's rifle against Korvac's blades, moving in a blurred dance of death across the throne room floor. Parker could feel his strength waning, his injuries and fatigue taking their toll. But he fought on, driving forward step by step, his mind fixed on the billions of lives hanging in the balance. Korvac's blade slipped past Parker's guard, scoring a deep gash across his chest plate. Parker staggered back, warning indicators flashing across his HUD. Korvac pressed his advantage, hammering at Parker's defenses with a flurry of blows. But as the Emperor raised his blades for a final killing strike, Parker saw his chance. He activated his suit's phase shift, the world slowing to a crawl around him as he slipped into a different quantum state. In that frozen moment, he lunged forward, his rifle aimed at the weak point in Korvac's armor, right at the joint of the neck. The world snapped back into focus as Parker fired, the plasma bolt lancing out at point-blank range. It punched through Korvac's shields, through his armor, and into the flesh beneath. The Emperor staggered, dark ichor spurting from the wound. Korvac fell to his knees, his armor sparking and sputtering as it tried to compensate for the damage. He looked up at Parker, his eyes burning with hatred and something else, something almost like respect. "Well done, human," he rasped, his voice bubbling with fluid. "You've won. The antidote is yours." Parker stepped forward, his rifle leveled at Korvac's head. "Where is it?" Korvac laughed, a wet, choking sound. "In the laboratory, behind the throne, but you're too late. The virus has already spread too far. Even with the antidote, billions will die." Parker's finger tightened on the trigger. "We'll see about that." He pulled the trigger, the plasma bolt vaporizing Korvac's head in a flash of blinding light. The Emperor's body toppled backwards, smoke rising from the cauterized stump of his neck. Parker turned, already sprinting for the laboratory, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to get the antidote, had to save as many as he could. Nothing else mattered. He burst through the laboratory doors, plasma rifle at the ready. A handful of Malon guards turned to face him, their weapons rising. Parker cut them down with a flurry of shots, barely breaking stride. There, on a pedestal in the center of the room, was a small vial filled with a shimmering blue liquid, the antidote. Parker scooped it up, cradling it like the most precious thing in the universe. "Parker, do you have it?" Dr. Donovan's voice crackled over the comm, tense with urgency. "I have it," Parker confirmed, already heading for the extraction point. "Prep the ship for immediate departure. We need to get this back to Earth fast." As he ran through the corridors of the Citadel, alarms blaring and Malon soldiers shouting in the distance, Parker allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck at the very heart of the Malon Empire and emerged victorious. Humanity would survive. But as he reached the hangar bay and saw the battered remains of his team, the satisfaction faded, replaced by a cold, gnawing dread. Sullivan, pale and still, his life signs critical. Mac, his face etched with pain as he cradled a shattered arm. Dr. Donovan, his eyes haunted and hollow. "Roy," the scientist said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's something you need to know about the antidote." Parker listened, his heart sinking with every word. The antidote was flawed, incomplete. It would save some, but not all. Not nearly all. He looked down at the vial in his hand, the liquid suddenly seeming to mock him with its promise of salvation. A salvation that would come at a terrible cost. "What do we do?" Mac asked, his voice tight with pain and fear. Parker closed his eyes, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like a physical thing. He thought of his family, his friends, all the people he had sworn to protect, and he knew what he had to do. "We prioritize the genetically diverse," he said, his voice sounding hollow and distant to his own ears. "We save as many as we can, and we pray that it's enough." He turned to Dr. Donovan, handing him the vial. "Make it happen, Doc, whatever it takes." As the ship lifted off from the Citadel's hangar bay, Parker stood at the viewport, watching the stars wheel by. Behind him, his team worked frantically to synthesize and distribute the antidote, racing against a ticking clock only they could hear. On the planet below, chaos reigned. Riots, looting, desperate prayers, and final goodbyes. The sound of a species teetering on the brink of annihilation. Parker watched it all with a heavy heart, the weight of the lives he had condemned bearing down on him like a physical force. He had done what he had to do, made the hard choices that no one else could make. But that knowledge brought little comfort, here, in the cold silence of space. Humanity would survive, but it would be forever changed. Scarred and battered, the wounds of this war etched into its very soul. And as for Parker himself, he closed his eyes, seeing the faces of the dead and the dying, hearing their screams echo in his mind. This was the price of victory, the burden he would carry for the rest of his days. The war was over, but for Roy Parker the battle had only just begun. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.